Hello, welcome to another episode of Drawing the Owl. This is episode number 4. My name is Sydney Icarus, and I am the Bruce Willis in Die Hard 2 of the RPG community. Drawing the Owl is a tabletop RPG design vlog where I go through and talk about the stuff that I'm making. For those of you capturing us for the first time, I am making a game about civilians going through war, scavenging, and trying to get out. With the latest news in Syria, there's going to be a lot to think about on my side as I go through this. But for now, there are a couple of changes that are being made to this. One is that I'm creating separate Google Docs for each week so that you can see what I've spoken about, what I've written, and where the game is progressing. And that's going to be linked in the description of each video. Let's talk about episode 4. So, last week, because we should always go back and talk about what we learned and what we've been thinking about. So last week we learned about aid moves, and aid moves have two parts. You've got a mechanical part and a dramatic part. The mechanical part is you can give someone a +1 to a move, and that allows players to feel like they're interacting together. And the second is the dramatic part, which is you can dive in front of someone and take the bullet, and that allows characters to feel like they're interacting together. We also spoke about aid moves pulling double duty, like in Night Witches, where you can use Vedemire once, but the second time you need to tempt fate. And we also spoke about the get involved mood from Uncharted Worlds and how that's such a cool, broad use of the term help that it could be used to pull double duty somewhere else. Where I screwed up, I'm really surprised there aren't more places I screwed up. But Dungeon World, they are called Grim Portents. I called them Dank Omens. I have to admit, though, I'm probably going to call them Dank Omens every time I play Dungeon World. And the second thing is my enthusiasm. It was a very, very late filmed episode, as I said, that I didn't have time to film at any other time. So I filmed about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was beaten, and I didn't give a lot of the games I spoke about the enthusiasm they deserved. A little bit disappointing. What I forgot, Urban Shadows. Urban Shadows has this aid move, which is lend a hand or get in the way. It's exactly what we've seen in every other game, which is +1 or -2 to the roll, 7 to 9 you expose yourself to danger, entanglement, or cost. Right? Nothing really new and interesting there. But it's also worth knowing that Urban Shadows has these debt moves, and debt is a currency that you pull when you do favors for people, and then it's cashed in on different moves. So when you cash in a debt, remind your debtor why they owe you in order to make a PC lend a hand to your efforts and stuff like that. So it's basically like you can cash in a debt to make someone roll to give you a +1, which is kind of cool. There's some really cool things that Urban Shadows does with debt. I mentioned in my text on the Google Doc that there's issues with agency in debts that I totally understand, but it's like just because you cash in a debt doesn't mean they have to do it. There's this refuse to honor a debt move. Roll with heart, you can weasel out of the deal, but still owe the debt, and that's. I understand why they're doing what they're doing there, but I don't think it's not something I want in my design because I don't want a player to be able to generate debt and then refuse to honor it continuously, I guess. I want more. I don't know. Even this miss condition feels not like something I want in my game. That's not the conversation that I want players to have. That's not what I want helping people to look like. We also didn't mention masks, which we should have, because masks does the same thing that Night Witches does. Over here in team mechanics, has a thing called team pool. Team pool is basically mission pool. The difference is when you enter battle, you add 2, actually, when you enter battle against a dangerous foe as a team, which is kind of cool. You add 2 to the team pool. If the leader has influence over each teammate, add another. If everyone has the same purpose, add another. And you can kind of like build up, build up, build up. And I mentioned that mission pool is interesting because of how much you have to sacrifice to get it. Team pool doesn't have that because it's going for a much more heroic tone, and that's awesome. And that's what. Oh boy, that's interesting. I actually don't know who wrote masks. This is incredibly rude of me. Masks core. Let's just have a look. Brendan Conway. Oh, Mike Dearstreamer did editing on this. Cool. Brendan Conway. Excellent. So that's what Brendan Conway was probably looking at there, of having a more heroic nature. So you want the +1. It's also worth noting that anyone working with the team can spend team 1-for-1 to help a teammate, which means that you don't choose to do it yourself. So we mentioned that Night Witches is you build it as a group, but the individual chooses when to draw from the communal pool to help themselves. Team pool is you build it kind of as a group, kind of by default, by playing the game as it's meant to be played, and then you can choose to help someone using this resource, which is cool as well. I really like both of those. And that's why we should have spoken about masks beforehand. We also didn't talk about blades. Now, blades is really interesting because blades has like 4 help moves, which are great. This goes into a lot of what I was saying to other people about how I think that the big step forward in blades design will be cutting a lot of stuff out. I'm not sure if blades needs 4 help moves. I think it could probably be less structured and be able to do it with less of these. But anyway, assist is your take 1 stress, give another player 1d. You don't add 1 to their result, which is great because, man, someone mentioned this on Twitter, and I love them for it. And I wish I could remember who it was, and I won't be able to look it up because of Twitter's search functionality, right? The comment was, be careful in a game when you use 1 as your number, because the next highest number is 2, and that's twice as powerful. And what that's saying is that in Apocalypse World, you have a range from 1 to 12 or 2 to 12 on the dice. You have a results range of 1 to 14. 15, I guess, with +3s. So you have a results range of 1. Actually, some can even do -2. So let's say from 0 to 15. So +1 is not going to break your bank. But in Blades, you have a results range from 1 to 6. So +1 can do a lot of damage. And therefore, you don't take 1 stress to give another player +1. Otherwise, your stress to success economy would go out the window. Instead, you give them +1 die. So you effectively give them the +1 die. You might also suffer consequences from the roll. I really like this because it's fictional. It goes to, it's not like on a 7 to 9, or if they miss, you also hurt yourself or whatever, expose yourself to risk. What it's saying is, depending on how you assist, you might also fictionally suffer a consequence, which is cool. Only 1 person may assist a roll. That's a currency issue. I'm not going to talk about group actions. They're kind of a different thing. Protect, face danger for a teammate, step in to suffer a consequence in their place. This is Vedemaya roll, as discussed in Night Witches. It's really cool. It's your dramatic moment. And set up another character with your action. If you achieve it, any team members who follow up get +1 effect or improved position. If I were to, I would be interested to see assist and protect rolled into one move, where it was like assist a teammate, step in, like get involved. You will suffer consequences from the roll, but they will roll with +1d. And also you spend 1 stress, which is kind of cool. I don't know. Makes me happy. Also setup's cool because it's this +1 effect to improve position thing. I'm actually going to go a little bit more into blade structure later and discuss why I love this so much. If I remember setup, we'll talk about why I love it so much. Great. So that was what I forgot from our last episode or our previous episode of episode 3. I'd be interested if anyone knows if Brendan Conway and Jason Morningstar know each other, had that conversation, or if like one was designed well before the other or whatever. If I have a look at, I mean, Masks was produced in 2016, which makes me think that was well after Night Witches, which makes me think that it was influenced by Night Witches, not the other way around. The only reason I want to bring that up is not because it makes Brendan's design any less valid. I mean, fuck, I'm sitting here going through everyone else's work. So I'm really hoping that I'm not. I'm really hoping that doesn't make games less valid. Bully Pulpit 2014. Okay. So Night Witches was 14, Masks was 16, and that's cool. The reason I bring it up is that I've given Night Witches a lot of the credit. I've given Jason Morningstar a lot of the credit on this and said, like, this is a really cool move and all that sort of stuff. And it would feel disingenuous for me to be talking about how much I like it in Night Witches if Brendan had created that design and I'd kind of forgotten him until this point. But it's great to see what he's done with it and how he's changed it to make it more heroic. And I would love to have a chat with Brendan at some point about Masks. It's a fucking wonderful game. It is so good at the superhero thing. Okay, so this session we're going to talk about a thing that Vincent Baker himself reminded me of. His website, which is lumply.com, and called he calls it Anyway, or has the big title Anyway at the top. Is a wonderful website that you should go through if you're interested in game design theory. It's something that he posts a lot of stuff about. And back in 2009, see, just recently, he's done this like retrospective about what he believes RPGs to be. And there's this really core concept called dice and clouds. Dice and clouds is, if we take a look at it, this idea that there are 3 things in an RPG. There's the fiction, which is the cloud. There's the mechanics, which are the dice. And there's the people and the conversation in the middle. And that is the smiley faces. And his conversation in Dice and Clouds is all about how rules move through the conversation to create fiction or create mechanics, and it's beautiful, and it's really something that I want to think about, because when I'm talking about how I'm going to design my own moves, and that's our next step, to talk about the moves that I'm going to write down, the words that I'm going to put down on the page. It's important to think about what I want that conversation to look like. If you remember episode 1, we discussed episode 1, maybe 2. We discussed a tweet that Vincent Baker had put up saying that in Apocalypse World, he has defined compromises, and he has said, if you want to go aggro on someone, if you want to use physical violence to threaten someone, this is the compromise that you are bound to. And that is really important, right? Because when we get to building my own moves, what we're asking is, what compromises do I want to occur at the table? And so we're going to talk about some interesting ways that this has been done in other games. So D&D is always a good touchstone for me because I think we get it, and I also think it's very structurally separated, which makes it a little bit easier to understand. So a rightward arrow like this means we say something in the fiction, and then we turn that into a mechanical result. So in D&D, I run at the ghast, shouting my father's name. This ends now, I attack. So fictionally, my character runs at the ghast. The mechanics is I make the attack action. When you make the attack action, you roll a d20. 12 plus 4 modifier gives me a 16. That's entirely a mechanical thing. This loop means that the people are still having a conversation, but it's staying in the realm of the mechanics. Then the GM would respond to me, well, his AC is 12, so that's a hit, and we know the AC is 12 because that's a mechanical structural thing. Oh, well then, because my attack is greater than his AC, I plunge my sword through him. This is a leftward-facing arrow, which means that the mechanics are speaking to and causing fiction. So I mechanically rolled a d20, and mechanically my result was higher than his AC, and therefore I fictionally plunged my sword through him. Independent of the fiction of what I do, I could have said I plunge my sword through him. I could have said I swing it wildly. I could have said I jam it in his face. Mechanically, I roll a d10 plus 2, and that gives me 6 damage. The GM then says to me, well, 6 damage is less than his total, so it's not enough to kill him. Your sword goes through, disrupting his form, but no more. James, you're up, so we're moving to the next player. So what this is saying is that the fiction is codified by this mechanical fact that I did not do enough damage to kill him. It doesn't matter what this fiction is here, because, and this is this thing I want you to see in the D&D thing. Right here at the start, we have this one rightward-facing arrow where I fictionally want to do a thing, and that causes a mechanical thing. And then we go into like this 3 or 4 stage mechanical loop, and then we come back to the fiction. Now, I guess fictionally, because I'm using a longsword, that means I roll a d10. We could maybe put another rightward-facing arrow in here, and say like, I'm using a longsword, so that's d10 damage. And by the way, this is something that I found looking at Vincent's work myself, is that it really does depend how granular you want to get on this and how many points you want to get into the conversation. So I roll a d10, gives me 6 damage, and then we feed back into the fiction. So the way D&D works is it's always this. It's always fiction feeds into mechanics, mechanical loop occurs, mechanics feed back into fiction. So it goes fiction feeds into mechanics, mechanical loop occurs, and then mechanical answer feeds into fiction. And that's problematic. And it looks, this looks perfect. It looks really intuitive, and it looks really structural, and it makes sense. No, of course, you do a fictional thing, then we roll some dice, and then we figure out what those dice mean. And that looks like it makes a lot of sense. But when I talk about how PBTA and how blades work, I think you'll understand why I personally, as a player, and also why a lot of designers are moving away from this. So let's come in. Let's come in and look at Go Aggro. So just to remind ourselves, Go Aggro. When you go aggro on someone, make it clear what you want them to do and what you'll do to them. Then roll plus hard. On a 10 plus, they choose. Force your hand and suck it up. Cave and do what you want. 7 to 9, they choose one of the above or one of the following. Get the hell out of your way, barricade themselves in, give you something they think you want. Back off calmly, hands where you can see. On a miss, be prepared for the worst. The one we're going to talk about is this 10 plus, force your hand and suck it up. So let's think of that. When you go aggro on someone, make it clear what you want them to do, what you'll do to them. Roll plus hard. On a 10 plus F, choose force your hand and suck it up. Now, no, we'll talk about that afterwards. That can come up afterwards. So Go Aggro. My character pulls a gun on Silkworm and demands to know where Marlowe went. That's an entirely fictional description, right? This is our MC. You've made it clear what you want to do, what you want, and what you'll do. you're going aggro, because remember the trigger for aggro is when you go aggro on someone, make it clear what you want and what you'll do to them. So fiction of pulling the gun on Silkworm feeds into the mechanics of like doing the go aggro roll. I roll an add hard, gives me a 10 plus. Cool. Feeds back into the fiction. Marlowe looks you right in the eye and says, "You won't do it. You need me." He's forcing your hand. He has chosen to force your hand. The character chooses to pull the trigger, giving us a fictional loop. Now, this is interesting. Fiction feeds back into the mechanics. You've got a pistol, right? He's wearing that Kevlar vest that he stole from Wheeler. A gut shot will do like 1 harm. This is the equivalent to I'm using a long sword. So I deal D10. This is fictionally equivalent to that space in the D&D one. I'm using a pistol. He's got armor. Therefore, a gut shot will do 1 harm. Now, here we get to an interesting split. And this split is what makes PBTA different to D&D. There's a lot of things, but this split is what makes the moves different. The character says, or the player says, I put it in his belly, he takes 1 harm, right? That's the rules. I have a pistol that does 2 harm. He has armor that takes off 1. 1 harm is enough to kill an NPC. Cool. I put in his belly. I wanted to know I'm serious. I say, fuck yourself, Silkworm. I follow Marlowe no matter what you say. When I do, I won't need you anymore. Fiction. I fictionally shoot him in the stomach. Take 1 harm is the mechanic. Mechanic. He takes 1 harm, but it's not enough to kill him. So, fictionally, he's bruised and hurt. Sounds like maybe you cracked a rib. He'll be out for a day or 2. But here's option 2. Here's option 2 that's interesting. Fuck that. I put it to his nose. That's our fiction. Let's see his precious armor handle that. This is AP harm. This is armor piercing harm. We're not going to worry about whether Marlowe's wearing armor or not, because this player is fucking done with him. Not Marlowe. Silkworm is wearing armor because this player is done with him. So they fictionally put the gun to his nose, and that mechanically gives them the bonus of AP harm. Now, off the top of my head, there's nowhere in the rules that says when you shoot someone, there's no move that says when you shoot someone you do AP harm. There's nothing in Go Aggro that says when you go aggro, you can choose to deliver harm in a different way. It's based on this term that's used a lot in Apocalypse World, which is harm as established. And harm as established means mechanical harm is modified by fictional forces. That's all as established means. Frictional forces. That's this term, harm is established, or the fact that the game is built around terms like this is what gives the player the capacity to do this. So imagine if we're playing D&D, right? And I say I'm fighting a goblin, and I hit him with my sword because my attack exceeds his AC, and then I say, the DM says, "No, okay, you do 2 damage," and I say, "Cool," I cut off his head. And the GM's like, "You fucking what?" Like, no, you're not. No, you don't have an authority to do that. You're not. You're breaking a rule by doing that, right? By saying I cut off the goblin's head. That's not the rules. You don't have authority to do that. The GM tells you when you can cut off the goblin's head, and it's when your attack exceeds his hit points. That's not something you're allowed to do. And by the same token, actually, in PBTA, harm is so nebulous as a concept with NPCs that, like, I think 2 harm is like there's a 50-50 shot they'll survive or whatever, as in the rules. But like what that means is that it can go either way. And so if you say seize by force, with your pistol against someone who's unarmored, so you're doing 2 harm, and you get you do. Well, let's say we've got knives doing 1 harm or whatever, right? Oh, fuck it, we're still using this pistol and armor example. Pistol and armor, I'm doing 2 harm normally, armor takes off 1, I'm doing 1 harm. I'm going to choose I inflict great harm. Fictionally, I shoot him in the fucking head. Now, the authority for that doesn't exist in the game, but the MC should roll with that and should be like, yeah, and then he fucking dies because a pistol bullet to the head kills him, because that's how the fiction of Apocalypse World works. There's no authority for that in the game, except for this term, harm is established. I'm establishing a fact. That fact is the mechanics have given me the authority to inflict great harm, and I am choosing for that great harm to be I shoot him in the fucking head. So let's come back. Let's talk about where we're up to. So remember, you've got a pistol, right? He's wearing a Kevlar vest that he stole from Wheeler. A gut shot will do 1 harm. Option 1 is I shoot him in the gut and I take the 1 harm problem. Option 2 is I put it up to his nose. Let's see his precious armor handle that. He takes AP harm, because that's established. I'm establishing the fact that I'm delivering harm to somewhere where his armor is irrelevant. The GM, actually, you know what? This is actually a little bit more interesting, because let's take out this sentence. Let's see his precious armor handle that. And when we do that, it's not actually a mechanical thing. The player is talking entirely fictionally. Put it up to his nose. His armor fictionally doesn't handle that. The GM then is turning this. Yeah, shit. He takes 2 harm to the face and he's gone. I think we see the boot come down next to his face and we see blood. That's like the lifelessness of his eyes. That is the GM doing this like, yeah, shit, you do that and it kills him, right? And then we get the mechanical fact that, where'd that go? There. We get the mechanical fact that he's dead, allowing us to like play with our narration a bit, right? Of like, we see the boot come down and we see blood and all that sort of stuff. But this is cool, is that the player influences the mechanics, talking entirely about the fiction. The player doesn't say, I do AP harm. The player says, I put my gun up to his nose. I make his armor irrelevant, and I do that by manipulating the fiction. Now this is entirely enabled by 2 parts of the text. The first is what we've spoken about, which is harm is established. The second part of the text that allows this is this term in Go Aggro that says, force your hand and suck it up. The term force your hand and suck it up is a fictional term. Let's talk about the differences. Talk about what the options were. So options. Vincent Baker could have said, deal your weapons harm and minus their armor. He could have said, deal AP harm. And he could have said, they die. Okay, so this is really interesting, because like 80-90% of the time, this one here about dealing your weapons harm and minusing their armor is what players will do or what players want. This one is like the other 20% of the time, maybe a little bit more depending on what kind of game you're playing. This is a result of that fiction. But this is really cool, Because what Force Your Hand and Suck It Up does is it says violence occurs. It's Vincent Baker saying they choose to accept your threat of violence, have a fiction-focused conversation at what this looks like. Force Your Hand and Suck It Up is a short way of and an evocative way of saying they choose to accept your threat of violence, have a fiction-focused conversation about what this looks like. So, this is also like tags enable this sort of stuff, like precise, forceful, area, reload, automatic, all that sort of stuff. Hidden. Those tags enable this kind of conversation. And I love that so much about Powered by the Apocalypse. Now let's talk about Blades, because I ran a Scum and Villainy game for about 6 sessions, and I've started playing Blades. We're 2 sessions into that now, and I'm starting to understand it more. I'm starting to get the intricacies behind Blades, and so talking to you is going to be a good way of developing that. Blades is really interesting. This is based on a mistake that my character may have made. I run at the Lord Warden. I'm going to make him the unprettiest he's ever been. This is a fictional comment. The player saying I'm running at them. We haven't even gotten into, unlike in D&D, where it's like, I run at him, I'm doing the attack action. In Blades, we say, I run at him, I'm just going to hit him in the face. And then the GM can actually say in Blades, like, yeah, you do. Yeah, absolutely. It's the same in Powered by the Apocalypse, actually. And that's why Powered by the Apocalypse starts with a fiction loop as well. I pull my gun on Marlowe, and I say, blah, 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 blah. Now, the GM can just say, like, Marlowe just pulls his gun back on you. Like, you've got an opportunity to shoot him before he gets a shot off because you had your gun out, but it happens. Because the GM's like, no, this isn't going to, or the MC says, this isn't going to go aggro. He's not going to let himself be intimidated. He's just going to fucking go for it. So he says, yeah, he just pulls it. And the same thing can happen with someone on the subreddit asked about sniper shots the other day. Like, if I'm a sniper and I'm set up and I've got someone in my sights, yeah, they just pull the trigger. Just go on. There's no need to make a roll there. There's no... This is captured by the sucker someone move, which is like when you attack someone unsuspecting or helpless. Ask the MC if you could miss. If you can't, just fucking inflict harm. Just do it. Just take him down. Just establish the amount of harm that you inflict and fucking end him. And that's super cool. That's the difference, a big key difference between this kind of indie PBTA Blades thing and D&D there, is that we talk fictionally before we get into mechanics. Oh man, I really need a cough button on this thing. I run at the Lord Warden, I'm going to make him unpretty. Okay. The MC is the one, or the GM is the one who takes us to mechanics. You're a tier 1 cutter, but like he's a leader of a tier 4 faction. You rush him and you're in a desperate 0 position. Fictionally, it's got nothing to do with... I guess this is actually a little bit of like mechanics. This is actually mechanics, isn't it? This is. I fucked that up. Where's my mechanics cloud? Okay. You're a tier 1 cutter. He's a leader of a tier 4 faction. You rush him and it's desperate 0. This is actually a bit of, and I mentioned before, this is about granularity, because what we kind of have is we could put a little bit of conversation in the middle, which is like, he's a tier 4 faction. And we could say he's faster, stronger, more equipped than you, you're not going to hurt him much, right? Hurt him much, if at all. So what this is doing, if we have this conversation in the middle, what we're actually saying is that it would look like he's a tier 1 cutter, but he's a leader of a tier 1 faction. It'd kind of do like mechanic to fiction and then fiction to mechanics, right? So if we wanted to like talk about the conversation inside this, we could do that. But this is like saying that the D&D thing we spoke about before, about like disrupting his form and stuff, is, sorry, what was I thinking about before? Oh, AC of 12. This would be like saying his AC is 12 because he died not wearing any armor. He just has an AC of 12 because he's incorporeal, and therefore it's like fiction influencing mechanics, but it's really not. It's just the mechanic of AC 12. So let's come back to this and talk about blades some more, and we're going to get rid of this because it's not relevant. Because I think it's disingenuous to talk about it like that. So fictionally, I'm going to make him super unpretty. Mechanically, you're a tier 1 cutter, but he's like the leader of a tier 4 faction. Mechanically, you rush him, and you're in mechanically a desperate 0 position. Okay, what if I rush him with a huge heavy weapon? Do you have one? On my sheet, I can mark a 2-handed weapon like a copper pipe. Okay, so mechanics of load and like what you're carrying give the player the authority to mark a 2-handed weapon. It's a copper pipe. So the mechanics are I have load 6. The fiction is I'm carrying a 2-handed weapon. Fuck, a big bloody pipe will probably shake him up more than a fist. Let's say that's desperate limited. It's not because of the fact that it's a weapon mark. It's not because of anything mechanical. What we're saying is, oh shit, yeah, if you're hitting him with a big pipe, that's going to be bigger than if you hit him unarmed. Let's say you're in desperate limited. It's not. This is very different to saying in Apocalypse World, fists do 1 harm, pipes do 2 harm. It's also very different to D&D saying unarmed strike does 1 damage plus strength mod or whatever it is. It's very different. What we're saying instead is fictionally, a big pipe will probably shake him up more than a fist. Let's say that's desperate limited. If I'm facing instead of facing the Lord Warden, right, with this desperate 0 position, if instead I was saying I'm going to punch a tank, and you say no, that's desperate 0, and I say I pull out a pipe, I now punch a tank, I now hit a tank. It's the same conversation we've had, but because the fiction has changed, instead of hitting a man, I'm hitting a tank. It's still desperate 0, right? So this is really cool. This is a really important thing about blades, is that even though we talk in mechanics sometimes, even though we have this mechanical loop sometimes, it's always about the fiction. It's always the difference between. So I pull out this big fucking pipe. Oh, well, he's a guy. And guys don't like being hit with pipes. Therefore, mechanically, you're desperate limited. Okay, cool. So instead of a normal heavy weapon, I'm going to tick off my fine heavy weapon. This pipe is carved with runes, humming with electroplasm. It's not a bludgeon, it's enhanced. So this is, I have 2 marks on my cutter sheet. One is for a 2-handed weapon and the other is for a fine heavy weapon. I'm instead going to pick the fine heavy weapon. And because I pick fine heavy weapon, I fictionally describe it being enhanced in some way. Sounds dope. desperate standard. So the fictional thing about being enhanced makes it desperate standard. Now, again, I hit a ghost. That's desperate 0. Oh, I hit a ghost with a 2x4. Still desperate 0. Oh, I hit a I hit a ghost with a fine longsword. Still desperate 0. This is the same conversation that we've been having, except instead of it being a person, it's a ghost. And we end up in a completely different position. In here, we're talking about desperate standard because I'm fighting a man who is better armed, better equipped, and better trained than I am. I have a heavy weapon. Well, I guess you can maybe do a bit of damage. Oh, this heavy weapon is like magically enhanced. Well, you know what? Maybe that's desperate standard then. Because like I get these 2 jumps. But if I was fighting a tank, I wouldn't get those jumps. If I was fighting if I was fighting a ghost, I wouldn't get those jumps because fictionally versus a ghost, and not talking about it like a ghast sort of thing with the D&D attack action thing, but like fictionally versus a Blades in the Dark ghost, it doesn't matter if you're punching it or if you're hitting it with Lord Skurlock's longsword itself, you have 0 effect because it's a fucking ghost. If you punch it with a lightning hook, which is designed to take down ghosts, you get extra effect because it's not because mechanically lightning hook has like a tag on it or anything like that. It's because fictionally ghosts don't get damaged by regular stuff. They get damaged by electroplasm stuff. If you're a leech and you've made grenades, throw a grenade at a ghost, it doesn't fucking care. But throw an electroplasm grenade at a ghost, it cares. Not because mechanically it's electroplasm, but because fictionally you've positioned it in such a way that your grenade has electroplasm. That's really cool and really interesting, and that's part of Blades. So, sounds desperate standard. Are you rolling skirmish? This is the thing. Fictionally, you have a cool pipe that's going to hurt him. Desperate standard, are you rolling skirmish? So we're going to come, and this are you rolling skirmish is not kind of part of, it's like just moving the conversation along. Okay. Yeah, skirmish. I got a few dice there. I'm diving in, braining with my pipe. So as a player, I want to roll the thing that I have the most dice in, which at the moment is skirmish. So I let the mechanics of skirmish, of choosing skirmish, influence me into picking the fiction. Now, there is a conversation that could be said that there's an argument that, so I guess that's skirmish. Is a fiction influencing mechanics method, not a mechanics influencing fiction method. But I believe in my heart of hearts that I believe in my heart of hearts that most players live and die by the top example, with the bottom example happening sometimes. I think that the bottom example happens sometimes with Apocalypse World, where it's like I pull my gun out and I shoot him, and I say, I pull my gun out and I say, you need to leave, and then I shoot him, and you're like, wait, are you going aggro? And you're like, no, I shot him, so it's not a go aggro move. It's seize by force. I'm seizing this town by force. That would fit this bottom version. of the fiction of what I've decided to do influencing my mechanics. But I think that most of the time, and I think I should be designing for the bell curve that most of the time, players will let their mechanics influence their fiction, and that's good. That's great. That's great. Fraser Simons is really, really, really good at this. He has absolutely captured this in the Veil. In the Veil, I've never spoken to him about it myself, but I've heard him have a conversation about it on a podcast. In the Veil, you choose which emotion you're acting with. So, like, are you angry? Are you afraid? What's the deal of how you're acting at the moment? And when you use when you go too hard into one emotion, you spike, and you like have to make a choice about whether you keep using that emotion or whether you move on to another one or whatever. And the thing that I've heard Fraser say about this, I'm just trying to pull the text up because it's worth being aware of this. Okay, here it is. Here it is. And it's really good. Fraser, you're so good at games. We're looking over here on this right-hand side, alleviate. When a PC marks the 5th box in an emotion, so when you've done the same emotion, all modifiers change temporarily. The state modifier the 5th box is marked in becomes +1. All other state modifiers become +2. -2. In addition, the player chooses one of the following when another move is triggered in order to deal with the spiked out condition. So modifiers change. Next time you incite a move, choose one. You either keep using the spiked out emotion, in which case it decreases by 1 each time you do so. When all emotion spikes have been removed, all state modifiers go back to normal. Or use a different state with a -2 modifier. If you do that, you erase all emotion spikes, and then you mark one in the new state you rolled. There's a lot of like protected words going on in there, spikes and states and all that sort of stuff. But basically what it means is this. This is it. This is at its core. As a player, if you try to push the game and like try to like metagame by being like, no, I'm always angry all the time, so I'm going to roll with anger. I'm going to try and seduce them. Oh, what emotion are you using? Anger. I'm angrily seducing them. I'm going to try and neutralize them. What are you using? Anger to neutralize them, obviously. Ultimatum. I'm going to ultimatum them with anger. And that's, if you do that, when you spike, you tell a cool story. And if you don't, and if you jump around and like try to use other emotions and try to like make your character like spread a bit and be like a bit more interesting and engaging in a really typical, in a really classic way, by having that variety, you tell a really good story. Which like Fraser's designed this thing where players get a choice, but it doesn't matter what you choose. It doesn't matter how hard you min-max this game. You're going to say something cool, and that makes me really happy. And Blades does a really similar thing. In Blades, it's done by giving the GM the choice of what the position and consequence is, which means that if you want to just keep hitting people, if you're like me, so this is where it came from, the Lord Warden thing. I was playing a cutter, and I'm like, fuck, the only thing I can really do is hit people. I'm going to hit the cutter. I'm going to hit the Lord Warden. And Kyle, our GM, was like, all right, you want to do the thing you're really good at, even though it's not the most appropriate thing? That's a desperate position. Go do it. And I really get behind that. Like, I dig that because it made it really interesting. So let's keep going. Skirmish got a few dice there. Diving in and bringing with the pipe. Cool. Okay. He's a tier 4 guy. You're crossing a huge courtyard to get him. He'll probably get a chance to pull out his pistol first. Fiction into fiction. Which means you'll have to resist some harm before you even roll your action. Are you in? Fiction, mechanics. This thing, even though it mentions him being a tier 4 guy, tier 4 here is kind of a code word for like well-equipped, strong, functional, right? Even though I've used the term tier 4, that's players using kind of a glossary to talk to each other, not using a mechanic. He's not saying because he's tier 4, he gets a chance to pull his gun. What he's saying is, this is someone who is likely to carry a gun. You're crossing and is competent. You're crossing a huge courtyard to get to him. He's probably got a chance to pull out a pistol first, right? That's cool. Which means you'll have to resist some harm before you even get to him. To roll your action, are you in? The player doesn't want that. The player doesn't want to resist harm. The player looks at their sheet and says, oh, I've got this mechanical thing called a rage potion. I might drink my rage potion before I run at him. And the question here feeds into the fiction and the fictional response. It gives me superhuman strength and speed. Will that speed to charge? Will that give me the speed to charge him before he pulls out the gat? And the reason this goes to mechanics is because what the player is actually asking is, will that give me the speed to avoid a resistance roll? This could be, if you wanted to say, a fiction looping into fiction roll, but I think that it's fiction into mechanics because the player doesn't actually care about the fictional thing about this guy reaching into his gun. The player's kind of more interested about the mechanical result of that. Will that give me the speed to avoid a resistance roll? The GMs mark off your rage potion, your fine heavy weapon, and roll skirmish at desperate standard. So this is the roll your attack, get the AC thing. The GM's like, yep, cool. If you do that, we all know what the fiction, we've established what the fiction looks like. The mechanical result of that is that you have to roll a desperate standard skirmish roll and mark those resources off. With 2 dice gives me a result of 5. I'll take that. Okay, 5 on a desperate is you do it, but severe harm, serious complication, reduced effect. Let's give you a reduced effect. We'll start an 8 clock called Knock Out the Lord Warden. Normally a standard effect would tick 2, but with a reduced effect, we're just ticking 1. Mechanics feed back into fiction. So 1 tick, I think he goes for the gun. Your pipe smashed the gun hand. Normally it would shatter the hand of a normal man, but he's not a normal man. You see sparks. His arms made of some spark-ride construct. And it holds up to the blow with just a bit of smoke. And the reason that it holds up to the blow with just a bit of smoke is because we're just ticking 1. The reason that's happening is because I rolled a result of 5. So what's really interesting here, if we zoom out so we can look at some this at range, is that Blades in the Dark has the same structure as D&D, which is basically this, right? Which is you do a thing, mechanics take care of some stuff, and then that feeds out. What Blades in the Dark has in the middle is all of this stuff, right? All of this negotiation, fiction into mechanic negotiation. Remember, every single one of these arrows has us, the players, the conversation in the middle. And so D&D right up top, fiction into mechanics, mechanical loop, mechanics into fiction. Go aggro in PBTA is fiction into mechanics to decide that we're rolling our roll. Mechanical loop, we roll it. And then mechanics feed into fiction, but then there's fictional negotiation about what those mechanics mean. Because it's not about you get plus this and you minus that. It's about you do a thing. So that's like, man, I just had another thought that I want to quickly jot down because we're going to be talking about it later, which is Blades assistance equals position effect, not dice. Cool. I really want to talk about it. All right. Blades, on the other hand, is like the loops interact the whole way. It's always bouncing back to the fiction. Fiction's always influencing the mechanics. Because position and effect don't mean anything, they're concepts that we assess. So like we constantly have to be bouncing back and forth and 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 in and out and in and out and in and out and all that sort of stuff. And so it comes down to this. D&D is fiction, mechanics, fiction. PBTA has a back and forth between fiction and mechanics, and then it has the move structure, the mechanical loop, and then it goes back and forth. Blades is a wash. Blades you can never really talk about the mechanics of Blades without talking about fiction, and that's because Blades has position and effect where Apocalypse World has moves. Apocalypse World's central structure has like this move structure. Ah! Ah! Oops, not that one. That's the one I used to use for this. Sorry, y'all. That's a mouse with a back button on it. Can you believe it? Okay. Has position effect or Apocalypse World has moves. Imagine Apocalypse World that said, when you go aggro, instead of roll plus hard, we say decide how well positioned you are to achieve this, then roll a percentile dice that met your assessment. On a success, etc. This line about design how well positioned you are to achieve this is like basically what Blades does. What Blades does with all its moves. Blades is built on a single move that says when you do something dangerous, decide how well positioned you are to achieve this, then roll d6s equivalent to your capacity to achieve it, and then do it. And it's really cool. It's really, really, really cool. So I want to talk about Blades' assistance, position effect, not dice. I really like, from a help move perspective, we were talking before about Blades having 4 help moves. This one about take 1 stress to give another player 1d, I think is so mechanical. Like, it's so not Blades. I think this is the epitome of Blades, right? So what I would do if I was making a Blades game, which this may turn out to be, is instead I would make the Blades help move, or the Forge in the Dark help move, be when you assist someone, say what you do, take 1 stress, or take 1 stress, say what you do, then alter the other player's position or effect as necessary. Interesting. Blades has a single space where the core mechanic, where it's a mechanical loop and not a fiction influenced loop. And that is when we roll the dice based on what we're doing. Right? It's fictionally influenced, but it's a mechanical loop. It's fictionally influenced as much as saying where carrying a longsword gives you D10 health, D10 damage. I wonder what a Blades game would look like where you took out the ability to add extra dice. You're always rolling 2d6 and taking the highest. Crits are always on the table. The only difference is your position and effect, which means who your character is defines part of your position and effect. Oh, you're a cutter and you're going to punch the guy? That sounds like something you do. That sounds like something you'd be good at. So take extra effect. Oh, you're a cutter and you're going to sneak around? Well, that doesn't sound like you. So take less effect, or maybe it puts you in a worse position. And then if you want to help someone, you don't help them by giving them extra dice. You help them by improving their effect. I wonder where in Blades the best curve is for success and failure to both have an opportunity to occur. Considering that 4-5 is such a bad result in desperate positions and such like a moderate result in the others, I would assume that 2 dice would not ruin it too much. What an interesting idea. So we're just going to put down here. We're just going to put down here Blades hack idea. Always roll 2d6. But your skills, what are they called in Blades? Actions. They're called actions. Your action equivalents. Yeah, we're going to learn. I've never learned how to spell equivalents. I can never spell maneuver either, and that's as someone who used to be in the Air Force. Maneuvers was a big thing. Always roll 2d6, but your action equivalents change your position and effect. I wonder what that would look like. I wonder if that's more or less interesting. We shall see. More and more as I play Blades, I'm starting to think that Forged in this war will work as a Blades hack, especially because of how well Blades does pressure externally. If we remember episode 1, I said that Blades does internal pressure with player ambition, but Powered by the Apocalypse does external pressure with player starvation. But that's not really true. Blades does have a really good setup for external pressure, just in tier. We were a tier 1 crew and we were taking on the Spirit Wardens. We were getting fucked, and it just felt so good for what I want this game to feel like. I was a cutter. I was doing my best shit. I was fighting the Lord Warden, so everything I did was desperate zero, and I had to push myself, and I had to spend all this resource to get up to be able to even give them a go, and that felt so right for what Forge in this war should feel like. Blades to me has always previously felt really heroic because we've always been fighting equivalent tier things, and I think that getting away from that and going to fuck someone up that was much more powerful than us was really important. So maybe if I was going to do Forge in this war in Blades, the players would start as a tier 0 crew, and everyone else would be tier 2 or higher, or tier 3 to 5 maybe. Everything. You leave the house, it's desperate limited. And then you have to fictionally position, you have to set yourself up. You have to get shit that makes you able to get the stuff that you need. Yeah. Interesting idea. Next week. Next time we talk. Next episode. What do we want to talk about? We're going to talk about the campfire hack. And we're going to talk about phasic games. We're going to talk about phases because phases are really interesting to me, and whether I have a Blades game on my hands or a PBTA game on my hands, it's going to have a phase system in there in some way. It doesn't matter how small it is, and we'll actually talk about the tiny phases that exist in some games. But that's what we're going to talk about. Campfire hack and phasic games. Not in that order. We'll talk about phasic games first, and then we'll talk about why I like the campfire hack. Excellent. Now, I would recommend, and I've put in the description, a link to Vincent Baker's website of lumply.com. Go there, have a read through the 11 articles on dice and clouds. Have a read through the 11 or so articles about positioning real and fictional. That one also has a lot of stuff from Emily Care Boss in it, who is fucking amazing and is definitely worth a read. It's all Vincent's work, but he quotes Emily a lot. It's really, really good. Then your homework, if you wish, is to find the phases that exist in Apocalypse World 2nd Edition, Dungeon World, and so we know how phases work in Blades. We know how phases work in Night Witches, and if you don't know either of those, your homework is to read them, Blades and Night Witches, in terms of their phases. Night Witches, just read the bit about day-night, and Blades, read the bit about payoff and how the score and downtime and what's it called? I don't know. There's a section about it's yeah. I don't know. Have a look. There's one with the ink blots, and it's got free play, downtime, the score. Have a look at how Blades talks about those interacting. Read the bit in Night Witches about phases, and then read the Good Society quick start about phases. We'll talk about Good Society. And finally, we will phase it game. So we've got Night Witches, Blades, Good Society. Oh, and then finally, look at Apocalypse World and Dungeon World. If you are familiar with those other 3 games, look at Apocalypse World and Dungeon World and tell me what phases exist inside those games. And then we'll talk about that when we come back to it. So Blades, Night Witches, Good Society, and then we're going to talk about Dungeon World, Apocalypse World 2E. Not Monster Hearts, not Lady Blackbird we'll get to talk about as well. John Harper gets a lot of airtime on here because I really like Blades and Lady Blackbird, so he just gets all the fucking time. All right, so we'll talk about those phases. Until next time, it is a pleasure, as always. If you have any questions, I'm reachable on Google Plus or Twitter, at Action Economy on Twitter, Sydney and Chris on Google Plus, or leave a comment on this video and I'll see it. Thank you for your time. Keep drawing your owl, and I would love to see whatever you're working on. Thank you.